Well, thank you,
To
Bill.
be the starting point. Yeah. Um, Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned before on our other call, the reason for this is to scratch an itch that I had 25 years ago when I started running software teams. I wanted to find stories of people who were leading software teams, and I couldn't find them, and I still haven't found them. Which I finally got so frustrated. I was like, okay, forget it. I'm just gonna do my own podcast, go first person, get these stories, and in the hope that they will help other people who are either individual contributors who are thinking about moving into leadership roles, or they're already in those places and they're kind of curious, like, how do other people do it? What could I do better? Because I'm always thinking about, oh, how could I improve on this, right? Or sometimes, I hear enough stories and I'm like, oh, we're already doing this part pretty well. Let's go focus someplace else where we think we have more room for improvement. So that's the whole backstory.
Totally understand. It's a great dream.
Thank you. So the first question that I always ask, and really this is, by the way, the entirety of my script, is this one question. So if you're expecting more, it doesn't exist.
No.
How did you get started in leadership? Like going all the way back to, you were 7 years old and you were the quarterback on the neighborhood football team.
Gosh, that's a great question, Bill. And my story is so different from that.
Okay.
You would think someone who's been a CTO or VP of engineering and been in executive leadership for 20 plus years was that guy being the quarterback on the high school team, or president of every single club you can think of in high school, and same thing in college. And every group project, you end up being the group leader of the project by default. I did none of that stuff. I
Okay.
decided I decided in the eighth grade that I wanted to be a computer scientist. I took my first programming class. I wrote a text adventure game in BASIC on, one of the early versions of a PC. And I thought from that point on, like, this is what I'm going to do. And from then on, I worked hard. I went to a really good college, taught me a great work ethic, and got into industry. And I started doing things. And I think I guess the first hint of leadership is had a couple jobs out of college. I kind of thought one of them was consulting, and I thought I can go do this. So I quit that job. I found a couple clients. I started a consulting company. I found about three or four other people who wanted to consult and wanted to have a little more control over what they do. So therefore, I'm now a leader of this, powerhouse 3 or 4 person computer science consulting company, and I did good work. I got, there's always a combination of luck and opportunity and talent and effort, right? All those things come together. And I think they all came together in equal measures for me. So as a consultant, I was at a company and was working on some pretty high profile projects. I'm Bill, I'm 23 years old. I don't know anything. I know how to code and I'm scrappy, right? And I will say I'm a much better coder today than I was back then, just trying to make things happen. So I was at a company, I was working on high profile projects. I remember being in the CEO's office a couple times, asking some questions about what I'm working on. And again, I'm 1 or 2 years out of school, and wow, what an exposure, what an experience there, right? And because I was a consultant, this company ended up getting acquired, and the executives of that company wanted to branch out on their own and start their own software company. Of course, they all had non-competes, no solicitation agreements, et cetera, et cetera. And here I was, a consultant, not touched by those agreements, seemed to know what I was doing. And they approached me and said, "Hey, we'd like you to consult with us." And about 2 weeks later, they said, "No, we'd like to hire you as system architect." I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." And remember, this is 1998, though. We all thought we were going to be billionaires overnight, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so they hired me as system architect in 1998. I come up with an architecture that will work. Web applications were not ubiquitous at the time. Everything was kind of groundbreaking. Came up with a system. And when you're a system architect and you go hire 10 engineers and you're a startup, eventually someone says, "Well, we need someone to manage that group of people. Hey, Tim, they're listening to you. Why don't you go be the manager?" I'm like, "Okay, great. What does that mean?" Well, someone tell me what that means to be a manager. So I have no idea. So I was kind of thrown in the deep end. I like I'm not a control freak, but I like knowing the direction of the path. So being a system architect, understanding the path is going to take to get to a system that could be generally available. Like all that is in my wheelhouse. It's how I think, it's how I deliver. And so people listen to me. And eventually, 10 months later, after starting in 1998, I'm now manager of engineering. Well, we scale pretty large, like 150 people in the next 2 years. And then the bubble burst, and we go from 150 people to 80 people overnight. And as manager, what do you think my job was to do that day? And Bill, I can still tell you, I look back on that day, and that was the hardest day of my career. And anytime I've been called to do that in my career, because we're not doing well as a company, I will tell you those days were the hardest days of my career. Like being a leader when things are bad and when you have to make decisions on who gets to continue with the company and who doesn't, that puts some hair on your chest, let's just say.
Yep.
Um, and so I went through that, and we recovered, and we grew, and we got to the point where I was still a manager. I now had 25 direct reports, and as you know, being in a leadership in software industry, that's just untenable. So now I'm tasked with. I now have to go install a management tier. I got promoted to director. I think I was 25 years old. Still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still scrappy. We're still delivering, still making it happen. We're hiring good people. And so now it's my job to um, go install a layer of management and there's 25 people. And I think we went to like 4 teams or something like that. And I had to make some really tough decisions. One of the decisions I made was I put a kid who I hired out of college who had been with us for 4 years, who was outstanding. I selected him as one of the managers. So you can imagine what some of these 6, 7, 8 year folks thought of my decisions at that point, right? Very, very tumultuous at the time, right? And so that was another kind of like step function of becoming a leader, of making a tough decision, justifying that. And I will say, I love my boss at the time. I'm not going to mention my name. I might send him a link to this podcast. I'm going to say it out loud. He is not a good mentor. He was never a good mentor. The only coaching I got when I became a manager was like, now, Tim, I just want to let you know that salary as a construct is not fair. There's a lot of things that go into it, where you are, when you come in, what it's going to take to get you here. But what does happen over time is salary becomes fair because people who perform get rewarded, people who don't. And so over time, that inequality kind of evens itself out. And hindsight being 2020, he told me that because there's one person on the team who was making more than me at the time. So that was the extent of coaching I got into leadership. Great guy. I love him to death, but he was not a good mentor. So here I'm 25, have to install some managers, and now I got to work with these managers to then manage their group and lead a group of managers who's never done it before either into the next phase of their evolution. And one of the things we had to do early on is, we were now probably 4 or 5 years into this, and we'd had a bunch of software engineers we'd hired. And the next question was, well, what does it take for me to become a senior software engineer here? And if I'm already a senior software engineer, what's next? So one of the first things I did as a director, I put together a technical competency matrix and title path, and we put together a system that the manager could sit down with their employee on a quarterly basis and say, here's where I think you are, here's where you think you are, let's talk, we'll compromise. And then there's a pattern to these things where it's like, okay, you start when your page looks like this and you're a software engineer, you've earned the right to be promoted to senior software engineer. So it sounds revolutionary, but 20 years ago there wasn't a lot of tools out there like that. So we did that. And by the way, I've since done that like 5 or 6 times, sometimes as a consultant to other organizations who are trying to have the same challenges, or I've done that in my own organizations that I've inherited. I've done this many, many times, and it's really well received, and it really helps us, especially when you start to get into the upper echelon, when you're coming out of like a software engineer to senior software engineer to a principal software engineer. Like in those upper echelons, you really need to see the evidence that someone has honed their skill set to the point where they deserve that title. And we had an evidence-based system to put that together. And that served me well for many, many, many years. And so kind of take that to the end. I'm now 12 and a half years into that company, and that company name was Aprimo. I by that time I'm VP of engineering. I have an org of about 70 people. I've absorbed practices like QA, documentation, or technical writing. At one point, I managed our physical data center, so I had systems engineers reporting to me. So that kind of just increases your skill set as well. And we got bought. We got bought by Teradata for $525 million. And here I am. I am the most technical person in the company. And now I'm now 6 levels removed from the CEO in a company that's 7,000 people, right? So I start thinking, my mind goes, well, the other thing that happens is when you're part of a company that gets acquired, you have VCs and private equity who may have had privy to information about the company saying, we need someone to lead engineering. Primo just got bought. Who led engineering? Oh, it's this Tim Sublette guy. Go talk to him. So my phone started ringing off the hook from recruiters trying to get me to go to the next place. So then that begs the question in my mind, like one of my philosophies is hire people who are better than you, right? Don't have such an ego that you got to be the smartest person in the room. I'm practically never the smartest person in the room. And so I learned that lesson early on, and that served me well. So then I started thinking, well, was I successful at a Primo? Did I build this organization? Did I get this organization to sell because I have skills? Or did I just happen to hire a bunch of people that were better than I am and they made it happen? And so one of my goals um, in the next gig, I wanted to be part of the executive team because I always reported to my leader, who was part of the executive team, one of the co-founders, and he ended up leaving, and it wasn't the right thing to promote me into the executive team. That's a weird dynamic. I didn't understand that at the time. I was probably upset about that at the time, but seeing that now, I was like, that's something really hard to break in. When you're kind of down here looking up, and all of a sudden there's a position, and try to pull you in that executive ring when everyone else has been there for 5 to 10 years. I think I would have failed miserably at that, by the way. So I'm actually thankful that I didn't get that opportunity. But I did. I had the resolve. Next opportunity is I will be on the executive team. So I got recruited by a company called Zermed out of Louisville, Kentucky, to be VP of engineering. And I said, all right, this is my chance. I'm going to figure out whether I have some skills or I just got here because I just happened to hire the right people. So I got down there. I inherited a team of about 50 people. You can imagine the dysfunction level was very, very high. You don't go hire someone in the executive team unless there's a reason to do so. There's definitely a void there. And so I spent the next 3 years growing that team from 50 to about 110 people and having to install another first line set of managers like I've done, like I did at a Primo. And that was actually a mix. I actually hired some from the outside who were seasoned, but I also looked around and said, okay, who's technical leader here? Like who's the person in the room that takes the marker and goes up to the whiteboard and said, here's what I think the problem is, and here's how I think we can solve it. And you're watching this, you're like, that's your next person right there. And I remember one person in particular. Um, I'll call him by his first name. His name is Kellen. Someday I hope he sees this. He was one of my success stories. I convinced him for 6 months that he had the chops to become the manager. He became the manager. He was awesome. I ended up leaving the company. And about a year ago, he reached out to me on LinkedIn. He was VP of engineering at some place. And he says, look, you gave me a shot back then. I'm now at the juxtaposition, the next thing in my career. I really like your advice. And I was like, I haven't heard from the guy in 10 years, but he's a story I tell to every reluctant leader who I'm trying to get to take that leap into leadership. Because it's really not that bad, right? People kind of draw that line, like, don't go over to the dark side. And I was like, you don't have to be that way, right? That's how my dad felt about management and engineering. Not, we don't have to feel that way. And so that was a great story out of that, where um, I made a difference in an individual's life who's now a VP of a 50, 60 person group because I gave him a shot 15 years ago. And he did all the work. I just gave him a shot. Right. And he
Yep.
was a spectacular individual. So I was there for, like I said, about 3.5 years. It was an interesting situation because they had a CTO that reported to the CEO, and then they hired me as VP of engineering, and I reported to the CEO. So we're looking at each other like, okay, how's this going to work? Now, luckily, we were both nice guys. We kind of separated it, but as you know, when you're an engineering leader, there's certain parts of it that you just want to own all of it. It's kind of hard, who we are as a core. So he took infrastructure and architecture, and I took all the project teams. So there's always a void in that for me. It just wasn't a lot of fun. A lot of project management, full-time hiring. Again, hiring 60 some people over a 3 year period was insane. But I also got to develop those skills. Every time you go into an organization and you need to be the hiring representative for it, you need to come up with, okay, about all the offers you're going to get, why do you come here? Why are you going to come work for us? Right? Because it was always competitive. Like when the industry is not competitive, that usually means I'm at a company that's not hiring either. So it doesn't matter. But when you are hiring, it's usually because there's a competitive industry. So you have to be out there. You have to have a product to sell. And so I always, everywhere, it was at that point where I realized I needed to have a story and a talk track of why this was the best opportunity you could possibly think you could have right now. And I honed that during that time, and I think I was fairly successful there. So, but like I said, I was also bored. So at the time, I was talking to a professor from the University of Louisville, and he had some PhD students who were working on some pretty crazy algorithms to do some predictive simulation of metal 3D printing. So think of like titanium, um, stainless steel. It's a powder bed of material. You hit it with the laser, you drop it down, you put more powder on it, and you're building up these fine layers of welding basically. And we could predict things like residual stress, defects, when the melt pool got too hot, and things like that. But it was really super high end. And so I kind of transitioned from corporate leadership of having anywhere from 50 to 120 people in my organization to now I'm a CTO of a startup. Now I got to go code again, right? Well, I mentioned this earlier in our discussion. I don't think I was a very good coder when I got out of college. So the first thing I did is I hired some people who were really good at coding. One of the guys as I hired, his name was Ryan. He was a former math teacher, so he had the heart of a teacher. He realized that being in the school system was horrific, so he went back, got a master's in computer science, and he was excellent at what he did. But he took the time to make sure that I had the right discipline, the right focus, and the right skill set. And after about 6 months, like, okay, I remember how to do this again. And after 6 more months or another year, like, wow, I'm better at coding now in my career, 20 years into it, than I ever was in the beginning, fresh out of college. It was just a great time. So I did that for a while. We ended up selling that company to Ansys in 2017, and our revenue was probably only 200 or 300K a year, and it was an intellectual property buy alone. They wanted to get into additive manufacturing. We had 25 people who were experts in the field, and so they came after us and they bought us, and it was a great transition. Um, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but where do you want to take this
No,
next?
it's good. This is good because it gives a lot of
Yeah.
context and pieces. And again, like people don't get to hear these kinds of stories,
Yeah.
and
And so,
and the career progression.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I think one of my takeaways is if you are laser focused on a progression track where I'm going to spend 3 years doing this, I'm going to be excellent. I'm going to get a manager position. I'm going to spend 5 years doing this, and I'm going to get a director position. I mean, those things are great. But if that's what you're going to live by and that's the road you're on, you're probably going to be disappointed in your life, right? You need to have a plan. You need to follow that plan, and you need to pursue that plan and be aggressive about that plan. But you don't want that plan to define your career, right? So there's at some point you
right.
got to kind of go with the flow. And mine was like the ultimate go with the flow because I didn't have a plan when I graduated college. I was just going to go get a job and see what happened, right? My plan probably didn't really come to fruition until a Primo got bought, and I now like, okay, I know what I've done in my career, and that has given me confidence, a lot of self confidence to know that I can, especially after went to Zermed and I kind of repeated my success there, got the right people in places and things like that. That's the point. I was probably 41 years old at the time, and that's the point in my career where I could say I could point to that period of time and I'd say I'm actually confident in who I am as a leader. Up until that point, from age 23 doing early leadership stuff to age 41, I had this feeling like someone's going to fit. Not quite, I don't want to use imposter syndrome. I think that's way too cliche, but I had this feeling like at some point somebody's going to call me out, tell me I have no business being in this position, right? Because literally I had to figure it out on my own. I had no one telling me whether I was doing it right or wrong. We just kept going. It wasn't
Yeah,
really until I went and repeated that success at my next corporate gig at Zermed, where I really walked away thinking, okay, I have a formula that I can build on. And so that was when I actually had a plan, which is okay, I won't take an opportunity that's doesn't have some kind of exit strategy, doesn't have some kind of equity play, because that is what has made me successful to this point, and that's continued all along. So So I ended up leaving Ansys after the acquisition. It was actually the longest place I stayed post acquisition of anywhere, and it was 8 months. Because in my mind, my job is to build a company, build value, and then realize that value. And it's weird, like the moment that transaction closed, I could just feel like my motivation and my purpose just kind of get deflated. Like I've arrived, I've done what I wanted to do at this company. So I actually stayed for 8 months. And the key to that longevity, quote unquote, 8 months is not a long time, but for my acquisition history, it was a huge amount of time. The first thing I did pre-closing was to the acquiring company is I've done this before. I should no longer be in charge. I will help you with integration. I will help you with special projects. I know a lot about the software, but my right hand guy, he's now your main point of contact. And if it wasn't for that, I would have lasted about 2 months because the corporate shenanigans that go on when absorbing a company. Like I remember getting my new laptop and it taking me, the entire day just to get on email to jump through all the hoops, to jump through all the security measures, to like keep calling people like, hey, this program won't run for me. You need to, I know what it is. You need to go into your Sentinel-1 configuration and exclude the subfolder for me. And it was like pulling teeth, right? It's just crazy. So I've never done really well in the post acquisition scene. Um, so I ended up leaving Ansys. I joined a startup where the number one investor was the former CEO of the company that I was with, where I really grew up. The CEO of the company was one of the best salespeople from that company, right? So these are all my friends. So I'd been around for 12 and a half years. And so they were calling me and we need a technical leader. And I asked, okay, are we competitive? Are we well funded? Are we all this, all this? And the answer was all yes. And I joined. And unfortunately, the answer to all those questions were no. And after
Oh,
about a year, you could see the writing on the wall. And after 18 months, I got the call. It's like, okay, we're shutting the company down. The board has decided not to fund us anymore, and we appreciate your efforts to help transition these customers. We found a buyer for them, a fire sale, right? So that was the first time in my career where we just failed. We utterly, completely failed, and we shut the doors. And so that was December of 2019. And I think as we discussed on our kind of pre-call, I live in Park City. When we started it's called 3D Sim, the scientific simulation company. We moved that company from Louisville, Kentucky to Park City to be close to the University of Utah because they have an excellent engineering program. And every discipline in engineering, mechanical, chemical, electrical, all had to have a subset of simulation experience in their field. So they're teaching all these disciplines how to write code. And it was perfect for us. You need someone who knows metallurgy. Great. They've done some kind of like cooling simulation software that they've written in MATLAB or something, right? So they at least have a concept of that. So that's how we got out to Park City. So in December 2019, we're shutting the company down. I'm now unemployed. And it's September. It's like, well, I'm going to be a ski bum this year, and it's going to be fantastic. I've earned that right. So I started networking like crazy. I talked to VC, I talked to CEOs of software companies. It was all, the timing never worked out right, but I was having 2 or 3 meetings a week and skiing a lot. I got 100 days in that year. And if you remember, that was 2020, that was the pandemic. On March 16th, 2020, we got an email from the resort saying, hey, we're shutting down for 2 weeks. It'll be fine. We're shutting down for 2 weeks. Well, as you know, it wasn't 2 weeks and it shut down 6 weeks early. So we actually bought what's called skinning gear, where you kind of hike up the side of the mountain and then you take off the skinning gear, and then you can ski down. And we did that for 20 more days just to get 100 days on the mountain that year. But my 6 months turned into a 9 month hiatus. The other thing I did during that time is I started an LLC called Dev Elevated. And my premise was I come alongside CEO or CTOs in the industry who may not have as much experience as I do. And I tell them stories, just like what you said in your beginning. Is like, I'm trying to capture stories. And I kind of felt the same thing. There weren't a lot out there. And so I would come alongside folks. Okay, what are you struggling with? Well, my CEO thinks I don't do jack. Okay, show me your measurement system of how teams are doing work and show them where you're setting goals, all that. And sometimes the answer is, well, we have all that. And it's a communication problem. Sometimes it's, no, we don't have that. Let's go develop that. And all of a sudden the CEO thinks they're a rock star because all they do is tell them what they're doing a little bit. Us tech types don't really like to let people know what's going on. Just trust us. We're going to get it done. So I did that with 3 or 4 clients during the time. And one of the clients that I did that with was a company called One Cause. They're based out of Indianapolis, and they're a fundraising platform for nonprofits. And so I flew into Indy on in December 10th, 2019. I met with the CEO, several of the other executives. And at the end of it, he said, "Well, I really kind of like to have my executive team a little closer." And I said, "Yeah, I'm not leaving Park City." And he's like, "All right, I get that, but will you consult with us?" So I added yet another company to my consulting list, and I just started meeting with them. And Bill, the darndest thing happened. They would basically tell me stories of how things were, and I'd be like, in the back of my mind, I'd be like, "Wow, that's probably not good. Let's talk about that." And it's like, well, here's how I dealt with that at a Primo. Here's how I dealt with that at Zermed. We didn't really have those problems in startup land, right? So it's just story time. And I
Mhm.
actually joked with them. I said, it's just story time with Tim. And then you tell me what you're struggling with, and I'll tell you, what I did in my career to overcome that. And the craziest thing happened. I'd get on a call a week later, and they'd say, "Yeah, Tim, we reorged. We thought your structure was better." Right? And they just change their structure, and they kept doing that. I'd make these suggestions, and all of a sudden the next week it's like, yeah, we implemented that. We thought that was a good idea. And so June rolls around, and the pandemic changed everything. One of the first topics I was going to cover with them is like, okay, what do we need to have in place to let developers work from home, maybe one day a week? That was one of the things they were struggling with, right? And obviously on March 16th, everyone just went home, period, right? You're done, right? And so now we're a distributed workforce. Steve called me up in May or June and said, "Hey, the world's changed. Maybe we should rethink this." I said, "Yeah, we should." And so I joined full time in June 2020. I've been there about 5 years. Kind of similar story. I inherited a couple teams. We grew as high as 6 teams. We did a little refactoring of the team. We have a smaller number of teams, but have larger people on them. So we've changed a little bit since then. But I really just kind of installed the same system: 2 week sprints, story points, measuring velocity, things like that. And the system's been in place for 4 years. We've tweaked it a few times to try to make it better, but it's just working. I don't feel like, from a process perspective, I don't need to do a lot. So now my leadership position at One Cause is, here's my opinion of where we're at. You presented me 2 different things. I would do this one because of these reasons. And it's just a continuation of story time with Tim, because I have experience doing that. And these folks are amazing individuals. This is one of the most disciplined product and engineering teams I've ever worked with, and they're really, really, really good people. Right? We're all from Indianapolis. They're Midwest folks. They're spades of characters. And their mission is to help nonprofits raise money. So it's a great group of people to work with.
Very
So,
cool.
so that's my journey I guess, a 28-minute run through.
That's awesome. Well, it's a good, like overview and framing and everything, right? Because people
Yeah,
can see the progression and
yeah.
they go, oh, wait a minute. He was uncomfortable at this game for 17 years.
Oh yeah. Think about uncomfortable. So back at a Primo, like, "Hey Tim, people listen to you. You're now manager.
Yeah.
So what do I have to do the next year? I have to sit down and write reviews for people. As a 24-year-old kid, I have to go sit down with a 35-year-old veteran in the industry and tell them what they're doing well and what they're not doing well.
Right.
Can you
Right.
imagine how nervous I was?
So, how did you get through the nerves?
Gut, brute force, and a
Brute
lot of
force.
grace.
Okay.
A lot of grace for the people on the other side of the table for me.
Mm, okay.
So I will also say that until I was about 38 years old, I had a lot of trouble getting in front of a group of any more than 30 or 40 people and speaking. Like to the point where you freeze up, your
Yep.
mouth is
Yep.
dry, words don't come out of your mouth, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna tank." And I went to our customer conference a couple years in a row with a Primo, and they would always give me a technical track to do, and it was always awful. And my manager would say, "I got all the reviews and the feedback, and you just don't want to see them." Like, yeah, I probably don't want to see them. So now fast forward to, I left a Primo. I'm now at Zermed, and I still have the same problem. Like, I cannot get in front of people. It's just night. I could not do it. And there's a local developers conference, and they were pushing us like, okay, Zermed needs to go sponsor that. They need to be a premier sponsor that. Well, as part of your premier sponsorship, you get about a 15-minute keynote in front of 600 people. Guess who did the keynote? I will have to say there was a guy in the company who was a wonderful storyteller. And there's a trend at the time. Do you remember Prezzies? Do you remember the
Oh yeah.
yeah, so it was like you get this picture, this theme picture, and your presentation was like you jump into like I think it was a sausage factory in mine, and so I was like talking about the sausage factory of that, and it was really visual and animated, and all of a sudden you go into the top of funnel. We talk about requirements and all that, and you jump back out to the big picture, and you jump into the mechanism. Like this is where the magic happens, right? And so it was a medium that really distracted me. The fact that I was sitting up on stage in front of 600 people, and I got through it. I
Yeah.
actually got through it. I don't think I did well, Bill. I'll just be honest with you. I don't think I did well, but I got through it. And then a couple months later, our CEO said, "Hey, Tim, I need you to talk at the company meeting. I need you to take this topic. I need you to spend 20 minutes on it." And that was 350 people. And I kind of took the same idea and I did this. And I got all, I left the stage. I went and sat by the CEO. He goes, "Wow, Tim, never knew you were so funny." So, because I also use humor. Like one thing I realized, like if I can open with a joke and people
Right.
laugh,
Right.
I just and
Yeah.
I just go right. And those two events back when I was 38 years old put me in the spot where I can just get up in front of people and talk. It doesn't matter. I can just do it. Now, the interesting thing is, you kind of went through the history post Zermed. I went to startups for about a 10-year period. Now I find myself back at One Cause, and the first couple of years we really didn't get together as a group because of the pandemic. And I remember I'm like 2 years in. We now have our annual company meeting, which we brought everyone in for. And guess who's got to get on stage again? And this time it was only in front of about 250 people. And I'm sitting there in the front row, and my wife always travels with me. And it kind of hit me like, I haven't done this for 10 years. Can I still do
Yep.
this? And this is like an auditorium. The lights are dim. There's a spotlight on you. Like it's like theatrics. I get up there. I just do my thing. And it was fantastic. And I got off
Excellent.
like, okay, I can do it. And that was okay. Then I kind of got reset. But I like had a 10-year period where I really didn't have to do that skill set at all.
Right. Right.
But yeah, so I think that's another aspect about me is like that to me before 38, and if I looked at my career, the fact that I couldn't get up in front of people and be articulate and knowledgeable and communicative, that was a death blow to anyone who wanted to go beyond that. And
Sure.
that's kind of like, if I had this plan to be CTO by age, 41, and I was sitting there at 38, I would have been devastated, right? I
Right.
would have looked
Right.
at me as like all these dreams that I think I want, they'll never happen.
Right.
Right. And you take someone who can deal with anxiety or a little bit of, stage fright. I mean, that just compounds and you won't make it out of that. So
Right. Right.
I think that is another real turning point in my career where I found a voice in front of people and I was okay. Right. I'm not going to
Yeah.
be Steve Ballmer up there, pumping up a crowd of 10,000 people, but I can go out and talk to a few hundred and make them laugh and let them leave feeling like they know a little bit more than they did when they started. So
Yep.
that for me is good enough. I'm not going to be a
Yeah.
professional speaker, right? It's just not my calling in life. So
Yeah. It's interesting because I used to have horrible social anxiety, and um, when I started, when I first got my first team to run, you know, I didn't know how to lead teams, right? Because I'd never done it before, no training. And my boss, who was the company founder, super good guy, really good philosophies, but no, like, here's how to execute, right? Like, he
yeah,
couldn't give me any behavioral stuff, right?
yeah,
And I had a couple of mentors like that, and I was like, well, how? And they were like, I don't know, I just go do it. Which,
yeah,
I'm like, I need more than that. But the getting over the social anxiety, I actually got a friend of mine, and I actually built a system. She got me started, and it was we leveraged BJ Fogg. He's a
No,
Stanford.
familiar with that.
So BJ Fogg's a Stanford prof. He wrote a book called Tiny Habits. We leveraged his model, and I went from being afraid of talking to people to now I like public speaking.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it was years, like, you know, it does not happen overnight, but it was a bunch of little tiny steps to move, you know, up, talking longer conversations, doing presentations, starting with, you know, presenting to my team, which was at that time, I think like 6 people,
yeah,
you know, just so I could get used to the technology, number one, and like using it, number two, you know, and then it was like, oh, now I've got to do this. And then I'm helping, you know, I'm building slides at another company for the chief product officer. You know, it was like these little tiny increments. And I've taught that process now to, I don't know, 200 plus people.
yeah.
And it
I've seen
works
that book.
every time.
Yeah, no, now that I just Googled it and looked it up, I've seen that book before.
Yeah.
I've been looking for some things to pick up and read. I just got a new Kindle. We're going on a trip here in a little bit. I'm gonna pick that book
Yeah.
up. But you
Yeah.
talk about like being incapable of teaching. It's like I just go do it. Right?
Right.
That's how I felt like my boss at Primo was. Like he
Yeah.
was not
Yeah.
giving you details. And so me to this day, like I tried to teach my son-in-law how to drive a stick shift the other day.
Yep.
And I was horrible at it. I was horrible. I was talking to my wife about it, and as I was telling her relaying to her what I was telling to him as I was driving my standard automobile, what I was telling him, what I was relaying to my wife of how I was teaching him was not what my feet were doing at the time, because I just go do it. I have the same problem with skiing. As you can imagine, I'm a pretty decent skier. I
Yep.
skied
Yep.
a lot before we moved here. Now we've had 10 years of 56 days a season. I hope it doesn't come across arrogant, but I'm a pretty decent skier.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't teach anyone else to save my life.
Right. Well, this is it's really common to have that,
Yeah.
because you have unconscious competency.
Yes, but I tell you, with software engineering and me as a mentor over these last 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been decent about it because I struggled so much through it for so
Right.
long. When I'm trying to talk to somebody about their issues and what they're doing, I have a big memory bank of long running struggles where I
Exactly.
dealt with that same thing. And I'm much better at articulating the steps I took and the things that worked. You know, I go back to the tech matrix thing I talked to you about, right? So I made a horrific mistake the first year, the first time I ever rolled it out. My mistake was you're an engineer, I'm your manager. I'm going to give it to you to fill out, and I'm going to fill it out, and then we're going to come together and talk about it. Well, you can imagine with some personalities there, someone's like, "Oh, I've mastered that," and I walk in and it's like, "You don't know Jack there." Now the majority of the conversation is an argument between you think you're here and I think you're there. So
Right.
every
Right.
subsequent time I've rolled that out, I'm like, don't ask their opinion first. You fill it out for them and be ready to justify why you think that, and give some good things like, hey, but if you master this, this, and this, I think you can improve that competency
Right.
from okay to master whatever the measurement skill is. That's something I learned distinctly because it caused so much pain the first time we rolled it out. And
Yeah.
that's how my
Yeah.
career has been. It's been 30 years of little pockets of pain figuring some stuff out versus skiing. Yeah, I went out as a 17-year-old and I fell down a bunch of times. And then over the next couple of years, I kind of figured out how to ski. And then over the next 28 years, I became really, really good. I can't teach that.
Right.
Like I
Right.
have no recollection. I have no way to teach that. My wife, who's been in women's ski camps for the last 8 years, is not as good as a skier as I am, but she's 10 times the teacher I am because
Right.
she has
Right.
gone through the teaching and,
Yeah.
and of people telling her where she is and what she's doing wrong. And she's progressed an amazing amount. And she's, like I said, she's a much better teacher. Anytime we have people in town who we need to get going, she will take them. She will not let me take them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, I think all of us have this thing where, like, I've spent a lot of years surfing,
Yeah.
and I grew up in Hawaii, and I started off just getting in the water and falling down and struggling and missing waves, and, you know, all like just like you started skiing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And um I didn't actually try and teach anybody how to surf until I was here in California and probably in my early 40s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I can teach you how to surf, no problem. You know, we'll go to Santa Cruz, rent boards. It'll be. Oh my God, it was
Didn't go
horrible.
well.
Did
Yeah.
not go well at all. And I because I didn't realize there's all these processes that run automatically in my head,
Hmm.
and a lot of it's visual pattern recognition. And I I would say, oh, there's a wave coming in. You know, it'll be here.
Now the timing is now.
Timing is now.
Start.
Turn around, start
Yeah.
paddling, right? And they'd be like, what wave? I don't see a wave. And I'm
How did
like,
you know that? How
right.
do you
It's
know
like,
right now is
right,
the
right.
time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's coming. It's like, it's closer. I'm like, it's right there. And they're like, I don't see it. And then I'm like, and it went by. And they're like, what? Huh? You know? And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God. Okay. I really, uh,
Uh, so funny side note, picture 13-year-old me carrying the longest surfboard you could ever have rented in downtown Waikiki to try to get to the beach
oh
and
yeah, yeah.
try to surf on my own. Let's just say, Bill, I didn't even stand up that day. Okay.
Don't feel bad. You know, that's
I was
like, yeah,
lucky. I was lucky to have any forward locomotion with a
yeah,
wave whatsoever.
yeah.
So I'm gonna have to come out to California, and you're gonna have to teach me how to surf.
Um,
That's my takeaway from this.
here's what I will say is I still can't teach it, but there is a great school in Santa Cruz right on the beach. We can get you in there and get you,
Perfect.
and because it's yeah, like I used to serve Waikiki a lot, and I watched the instructors and how they taught people, and it I couldn't replicate what they were doing, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'd never done it myself. Like I the teaching the biomechanics when I've never done it,
Yeah.
and it felt remedial, you know. I was like, I don't know that I can't make myself do that stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I will default to
Default to the professional.
yeah, exactly, yeah. That's it. And but on the flip side, um, because I think about everything as being a system, even if I don't like surfing, I don't always understand the parts of the system that I'm using.
Yeah.
Um, I think I do it better now than I used to, just because I'm now very conscious that everything I'm doing is a system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Like riding my mountain bike, I have a system for balancing my mountain bike and recognizing how steep the trail is that I need to downshift before I get there, and navigating around the rocks and the roots and everything, you know, and then, oh, turn around, you're coming back down, and unlock the shocks and, you know, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I do a lot of mountain biking too.
Yeah.
I'm not
The,
very good at it, but I do a lot.
yeah, it's, you know, good is always relative,
Oh,
you
I
know,
know.
like
I know.
my younger son, like just both up and down, just blows past me all the time. And I'm like, oh my God, you know?
Yeah.
But the thing that was interesting was my partner actually was the one that was able to help me see how all the little bits and pieces of the system for team leadership that I'd been doing.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and it took me less than 17 years to get comfortable with it. Although I'll freely admit the first team I ran, which I ran for 4 years, and then the next one, which was for about a year, I definitely had that same like, oh my God, someone to discover, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And I just got super lucky on the you know, first of all, the hires, and then the people
Yeah.
that I inherited. And then at the next startup, I kind of realized, oh, wait a minute. This is the third time that these people have operated well, and I've had a really high performing team, and I don't know why, but clearly there's something I'm doing that works. Like, and I, you know, my partner was the one that actually helped me to break it down to little tiny pieces, and to
Yeah.
give it language, so I could go, oh, now I get it, right? Now I understand why. You know, it's like if you went and skied with the people that train your wife, they could probably tell you exactly all the things you're doing that you don't even recognize.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
you're I got to think about skiing. Your uphill ski, you always lift and shoot it a little bit forward as you're starting to enter the turn, and you don't even
Yeah.
notice it, right?
Yeah.
And like all the little bits and pieces. And I needed, for me, I needed her to give me the language and to start me down the path of pattern recognition, so I could go, oh, you're right, that totally like one of the things I heard you say, you talk, when I ask you about like how did you do it when it was emotionally hard, is
Yeah.
that you had, and I'll use my language, you had values and priorities about I need to do this stuff that was more important than the emotional discomfort. So
Yes.
two things there. One is you had a very strong set of values and priorities. And the second was you knew that the emotional discomfort was the price of doing business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those two things, um, that is not common. Right. And because, where'd you learn that?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Where did I learn that? A couple of memories pop up. I was a mediocre B, C kind of student all the way up until seventh grade. In seventh grade, I decided to try for the very first time, and I got all A's. And there's that reward, that was that effort reward factor that kind of came in. I was like, hey,
Yeah.
it feels good succeeding at things.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
it feels good to like to feel like you know things. Like I actually spent 6 years on an island in the Pacific Ocean, and I left
Which
it on
one?
my. It's called Kwajalein. It's in the
Oh
Marshall
my God.
Islands.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What were you doing on Kwajalein?
My dad was an electrical engineer, and we lived out on the army base for 6 years.
Interesting. Okay. That is a very
So
small part of the population.
it was a very very small. There was 2,500 people there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so one of the things that happened is, when I came back to the States and they had to start slotting me in places like, okay, you took that, therefore you must be in this math class.
Right.
And I had a teacher who realized like 6 months in, it's like you're in the wrong math class, but they won't let you take this class and the next class in order to get calculus your senior year. So I want you to just dual enroll in pre-calc and as like algebra two all at one time. And she believed in me, and she pushed me, and I did it. And then I got into honors calc my senior year, and there's only like 8 people in the class. Um, Great teacher. I got it. I took the AP Calc test. I got a 5 on the calc on the test. I'm not a good tester. I'm really not a good tester. Um, I took the PSAT and I got like a 99.5 percentile. Ended up being a national merit scholar
Oh,
because
nice.
I worked hard. So that whole work reward system got ingrained in me early enough
Nice.
on. Like it wasn't as a kid, but definitely in the middle school on. And then I went to I don't know if you know Rose Holman. It's an very small engineering school in Terre Haute, Indiana.
I do not know that one.
Okay, well they are. When I was there, they were number three engineering school in the U.S. For years and years and years. Number three, like Harvey Mudd was in there, Missouri School of Mines. So we're not competing against MIT and all the big names.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
competing about niche, right? So they're number three, and it was also all male at the time. So I went to an all male college.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. I didn't even know that existed.
well, there was only two left, and like now it didn't matter for me because when I told you I showed up in the States on my 16th birthday, about a year after that, I met this wonderful young lady and we started dating, and we just celebrated our 30th anniversary this
Oh,
year.
congratulations.
And so going to an all male college while having her as my girlfriend didn't bother me whatsoever. But they made you work really hard, like exceedingly hard. Like
Um,
I had a buddy who was going to pre-med at the University of Kentucky, and he's like, "How much do you study?" I'm like, "Oh, probably about 5 hours." He goes, "Yeah, I probably study about 5 hours a week." I'm like, "No, 5 hours a night." And
wow.
years later, he was in med school, and he shot me a text. Goes, "All right, I understand what you mean now." Right, so they just taught you. I mean, you worked hard and you got stuff done, and you learned a lot. And so just that work ethic was always ingrained in me. And so when you're sitting in those uncomfortable conversations and your instinct is to get up and run out of the office, run out of the building and not come back, there's something in your brain that says if you do this, you will not be successful. You
Right.
will not
Right.
reap the rewards of a job well done if you follow your flight responses.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and I still have those flight responses. Like, I mean,
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
getting on a call with our board members or whatever, and they ask a question that rubs me the wrong way. It's like I want to turn off my camera and just sling a sling of expletives at them, right? So that's still there, but I know that if I want to be successful, I got to keep those urges in check and go
Yep.
back to the things that work well and repeat, like you said, that pattern recognition going on there. And there's one other point I was going to make about pattern recognition. It was really good, and I can't remember it, so we'll have to revisit that.
Okay. I'll remind you later on pattern recognition,
Yeah,
and you'll be
got it.
like, oh yeah, blah blah blah. Yeah. Yeah.
It will come back to me.
Yeah.
So
So that's really, it's fascinating to hear people's origin stories, right? That got these multiple different contexts where you realize that, oh yeah, the effort's really really hard, but the reward is totally worth it.
yeah,
And
I have another learning point, but finish your thought.
yeah, no, and I don't think that is as frequent a conversation point, like a deliberate conversation point, right? Like in a way, you're doing a deliberate practice of, I'm going to do this thing. It's going to be uncomfortable, but because it's part of your success track, you're committed to it, you know. And I think that's one of those pieces of the whole story arc that's really valuable for people to grab onto and go, oh yeah, this is the uncomfortable part. Tim already talked about this, and like he got to be successful because he was willing to do the uncomfortable piece.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going back to like the whole concept of, well, I can do, but I can't teach because I can't break down my own patterns and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I left a primo and I got recruited for Zermed, and I was taking over a team again. The thoughts going through my mind is, was I successful because of the things I was doing, or was I successful because I hired really good people? All that was going through my mind. I picked up a book. I can't remember the name of the book actually, but it talked about a 30, 60, 90-day evaluation and joining as a leader going into a new organization. And it gave you a series of things to think about the first 30 days. And
Yep.
first 30 days was about evaluation, right? And it was all about, is this a tear down or a burn down? Is this a rebuild? Is this a scale up? Like, what do you have? What are you inheriting? And it just talked through that. And as I read that, and I then had to apply this to my new situation, I had to draw back from what I saw at a primo. And so it made me stop and try to recognize those patterns. And
Right.
part of it was because I'm going into a brand new situation. They're paying me a lot of money. I'm now reporting to the CEO. I don't want to look like a jackwagon, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that was interesting. And then 60 day was all about like personnel evaluation, and 90 day was all about like creating the plan and launching the plan. So by the end
Sure.
of your 3 months, you should have been able to do all those things. And
Right.
all those
Right.
things forced me to put the last 12 and a half years of my career under a microscope so I could understand what was good there and what was not as it pertained to this book. So this book walked me through the structure of it, because really, I mean, you think about different people in your life. Like some people are super disciplined and super structured, right? They're going to wake up at 6 a.m. every time and do 25 minutes of stretching, do 25 minutes of meditation. Well, that's not me, man. I want to roll out at 8:55 and put on a hat and get on a meeting and say, let's go, right? So I need that structure to evaluate my own experiences as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, this book did that for me, and that was a good turning point too. And like we
Awesome.
already talked about the consulting, that was another point in my life where I really had to look at, like, this person is asking me for help around this situation. It really,
Right.
you couple that with the I don't want to let you down, I don't want to fail you kind of mentality. I'm going to examine my history and say, okay, what have I done that could help this person as they're going through this thing? And you really look at that
Right.
and you really think about it. And as you play it back, the last thing you want to do is that person look at you and like, what does that have to do with my situation? That's stupid, right?
Right,
So,
right,
so
right.
you really have to think deeply about what they're doing and try to put yourself in their shoes, and understand the struggles they're having, and then try to relate that back to your history. And
Right,
that
right.
puts a magnifying glass on everything you do as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I like that because, in the one, in one part of that, you're doing deep research, both on your own history as well as where they're at,
mhm.
um, because you want to understand, all these variables and all these different pieces. But then the other part is you're very deliberately communicating with them in their context, right?
Yeah,
So you've got to have
yeah,
this translation layer in there to go from the you know the stuff that you're learning on the research, which is an input of the translation layer, right? And
yeah,
your history, so you can bring it to them, and they can, in a story that they can relate to really well, and go, oh yes, that totally makes sense, yes, we should implement that, and and away we go. Yeah,
yeah.
I
And
like that.
yeah, and I got to repeat that in my current position. When I was hired on, they had an interim leader that they had put in place. He was a
Yep.
director of engineering, and when their previous CTO left, he raised his hand and said, "I'll step up to do it." And for the first year to 2 years, actually, it started with him saying, "Well, welcome, Tim. I want to address the elephant in the room. What is my role going to be?" And I'm like, "John, I have no idea. We're going to figure that out." And for the next year, I had people coming to me and saying, "What is his role? I'm kind of surprised you haven't let him go already." I'm like, "No, I'll just give it a little time." And after about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, people come to me as like, "Man, when things are down or things are broken or we're struggling, he's the guy we want in the room with us because he
Right,
gets things
right.
done." Right. And so I got to watch him transform. And I honestly, someday I hope he watches this podcast. His name is John. And I've had this conversation with multiple times is, most of the team is in Indianapolis, right? They often go in the office one day a week and hang out together. All the
Yeah.
dev managers report to him. I'm 1,500 miles away. I'm not
Right,
doing a lot of traveling, going back, having FaceTime. I could not be a leader of this organization if I did not have him on the ground making things happen.
right,
And he
right.
and he's done that better and better and better for this company over the last 3 or 4 years, and he's
Nice.
amazing.
Yeah,
So, but it takes that same thing. It's like, okay, what do I tell him to do? He
yeah,
doesn't know what his role is, doesn't know how to function, doesn't know how to behave. And I can say, okay, when I had engineering managers reporting to me and I did these types of things, so I can relay that back to him. So that
yeah.
was a third thing that forced me to look at my past history under a magnifying glass to try to understand the things that were useful and helpful, and then communicate that to someone who now has to put that into practice themselves. And
Right.
that to me is a great story as well, because he's a wonderful individual. He is an awesome dude. So
Yeah, yeah. No, that's all. That communication piece. I think people don't think enough in engineering about how critically important communication is. And I mean, I know, looking back over my career, that my focus on learning how to communicate better, number one, social anxiety, but then also learning how to do the research effectively and learning how to present to people in their context.
yeah,
um, I had peers that didn't figure that out, and they couldn't, like, they didn't get the cool projects.
yeah,
My team got the projects that mattered, right? And they were fun and exciting and challenging, and that's what the team wanted. And other people didn't get that because they didn't learn how to communicate effectively, and it made the executives not trust them well enough.
yeah,
They
yeah,
probably had the competency technically, but the execs were like, well, we know Bill communicates, and he'll do all the grunt work and the research and be effective in all the ways that we want, and so we got the cool stuff to work on.
and always that makes it fun too.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it was super fun. Yeah, it was amazingly fun.
I think another thing I would point back to is because I was in kind of corporate management for a long time early on in my career, like the
Yeah.
first 15 years of my career. And then I broke from that and I was in startups for about 8+ years. And I really got good at engineering, like individual engineering to that time. Now that I've returned to corporate management, I know better now all the data I need to gather so you as an engineer can get your job done because I was doing your job for the last 8 years. And that helped me
Right.
tremendously as well hone those communication skills to have the specificity we need to get something done the right way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's another one of those, the experience, you learn in the experience how to communicate, and you can't run away from the fear of I'm a bad communicator. You've got to be willing to lean into that, because success is on the other side. If you avoid that discomfort, you're never going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I looked at, my dad is a good storyteller. Like he's now in his 80s. And I've thought for the last 20, 30 years, he's a good storyteller. And in the beginning of my career, I was not a good storyteller. But
Oh,
when you have to sit down and write an email and you have to explain what this is and why we're doing this and all this, I spent 20 years honing my storytelling ability. And I think for the last, 6 to 10 years, I would consider myself a decent storyteller now. Um, and now I know, like, that's how my dad got to that point, right? That's how I
right,
got to that point. It wasn't a natural ability, but
right.
it's something that I had to develop to be effective at my job.
Yeah, yeah. I think that doing the reps, again, it's one of those things that we don't talk about enough. You get to be a better coder because you write more code. That's
Exactly.
reps.
Yeah.
You get to be better at communication because you do more communication
Yeah.
in every context. And that for me, certainly, it's like there's nothing I've started off being good at. I always suck at the beginning, and I just expect it. I don't even worry about it. I'm like, I'm going to do this new thing, and it's going to be horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and that's just the way it goes. And one of the things I notice in our work is people that I talk with, where their expectation level of how good they'll be at the beginning is way too high.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it looks easy because Tim's really good at it. I should be that good when I start off. And they completely forget that you've been doing it for 20 years. Right. And they're like, I should be as good as Tim on day one, and I've never spoken in front of an audience, or I've never snow skied in my life. And then they suck to begin, it's like,
Right.
and people just, I don't think the conversation about expectation setting happens enough to where we
Yeah.
can go, yeah, I hate to tell you this, but when you first go surfing, it's going to not go as well as you would
You
like.
might not even stand up on the
Yeah,
board the first day.
right,
Yeah.
right. But if you can paddle and ride a wave on your stomach, that's a win. Right.
Yeah. That'd be a good first day out. That's
Yeah,
good enough.
yeah. And so being able to have that level set, then it helps people understand, oh, this is normal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably a new grad conversation. Like, you hire somebody right out of college,
Yeah,
probably need to sit down and have a heart to heart about it. But I don't know. I'd have to think about that to make sure that, okay, this program is not demoralizing.
right,
Welcome to
right,
the
right,
workforce. You're
right,
gonna
right.
suck for the
Yeah,
next 5 years. All right. But hey,
yeah.
I'm glad to have you.
Well, I think it's also, it's about the level of work that you give them.
Yeah.
Like, figuring out what's the entry point. Like, when I started off in a professional environment with anything to do with engineering, I was doing user experience QA.
Yeah.
Like, there was a GUI that I could look at, and I could, they would say, here's how this is all supposed to work. And I was like clicking around. Oh, wait a minute, that broke,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, and once I got like competent there, then it was like, oh, here's what the code looks like. Can you figure out why it broke?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And I never touched it. And then they were like, okay, now can you change the code, and someone else is going to review it. Right. Like, they gave me this really nice gradual progression.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
6 months later, they're like, hey, we need you to build something.
Oh, so substance, right? Yeah.
Yeah, here's this little piece, just go build that. And it seemed like a small iterative difference in my head from what I'd been QAing. And I'm like, oh, it's just another test. Like, okay,
I
whatever.
can go do that. I
Yeah,
can
I
go
can
make
go
that.
do that. Yeah. And then they were like, oh, that's in production now. And I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you're kidding.
Yeah. We try to get all of our new hires. We like to have them have a pull request ready within the first couple days of starting.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it might be a defect fix. it might be a change to our onboarding docs that you found confusing, right? It doesn't matter, but get to the point where you're contributing to production in the first
Yeah.
few days, because it's not that bad, right? And
Right.
you'll
Right.
get there. And we have lots of protections in place to make sure that you don't put anything really horrible.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 And that's so smart. Yeah. I love that. This has been awesome. I'm looking at the time and going, oh my God.
Over.
Yeah, we're over. This has been beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.